Welcome to the show, everyone. Today, we're diving headfirst into the chaotic, fascinating, and often baffling world of demonetization. But why would any country voluntarily subject itself to such turmoil? Well, the answer, as with most things in the world of global finance, is complicated. Governments often turn to it as a last resort, hoping to cure a whole host of economic ailments, things like tax evasion, black market shenanigans, and runaway inflation. Over the next few minutes, we'll be taking a trip around the globe, examining 6 countries that have dared to dabble in the art of demonetization. We'll dissect their motives, analyze the fallout, and hopefully learn a thing or two about what works, what doesn't, and why messing with a nation's money supply should always come with a very, very strong warning label. Buckle up, folks. It's going to be a wild ride. Our first stop takes us to India, the land of spices, Bollywood, and in 2016, a demonetization bombshell. Picture this. It's November 8th. Prime Minister Narendra Modi takes to the airwaves and announces that the 501,000 rupee notes, a significant chunk of the cash in circulation, are about to become worthless. Just like that. Poof! Gone. The stated goal? An ambitious trifecta of curbing black money, boosting digital payments, and transforming India into a model of tax compliance. Noble goals, to be sure, but were they achieved? Well, the immediate aftermath was, let's just say, chaotic is an understatement. Imagine millions of people suddenly realizing they're holding on to stacks of soon-to-be useless paper. Long lines snaked around banks as people desperately tried to exchange their old notes. Businesses struggled to cope with the cash crunch, and the economy took a hit. Now, on the digital payments front, India did see a surge in transactions. People who had never even considered using a mobile wallet were suddenly forced to adapt or risk getting left behind. But was this digital revolution enough to offset the economic disruption? That's a question that's still up for debate. And then there's the issue of tax compliance. Did demonetization magically transform India into a nation of diligent taxpayers? The short answer is, not quite. While there was an uptick in tax filings, it wasn't the seismic shift the government had hoped for. So India's demonetization experiment, a success or a failure? The jury's still out. But one thing's for sure. It was a bold move with far-reaching consequences. Next, we hop over to the African continent, specifically Nigeria, where the year is 1984. The country is grappling with a nasty bout of inflation, and corruption is running rampant. In a bid to tackle these twin evils, the Nigerian government decided to take a page out of the demonetization playbook, their weapon of choice. The shiny new 20 naira note, but there was a catch. Citizens had a mere 3 weeks to exchange their old currency for the new notes. As you can imagine, chaos ensued. People scrambled to banks, businesses ground to a halt, and the black market had a field day. The result, inflation, the very monster the government was trying to slay, actually worsened. And corruption, well, it continued to thrive. It seems that changing the color of your money isn't exactly a foolproof strategy for cleaning up a nation's act. In the end, Nigeria's 1984 demonetization experiment became a cautionary tale. A reminder that good intentions, without careful planning and a healthy dose of realism, can sometimes lead to economic mayhem. Hold on tight, folks, because our next destination is Zimbabwe, a country that's no stranger to economic turmoil. By 2015, Zimbabwe's economy was in a state of utter freefall. The national currency, the Zimbabwean dollar, was depreciating faster than a melting ice cream cone on a summer day. We're talking billions, trillions, even quadrillions of dollars needed to buy basic necessities. Faced with this economic apocalypse, the government decided to take a drastic step. They demonetized the Zimbabwean dollar. But here's the twist. They didn't replace it with a new, shiny currency. Instead, they embraced the US dollar as their de facto currency. Now, you might think that ditching your own currency and adopting another country's would be a recipe for disaster, right? Well, in Zimbabwe's case, it actually brought a semblance of stability. Hyperinflation eased, prices stabilized, and the economy slowly began to breathe again. Zimbabwe's story is a stark reminder that sometimes, in the face of extraordinary economic circumstances, even the most unconventional solutions can provide a temporary lifeline. Our next stop takes us to Southeast Asia, specifically Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. In 1987, the country's military junta decided it was time to tackle the pesky issue of black market transactions. Their solution, you guessed it, demonetization. The junta's logic wasn't entirely flawed. They reasoned that by invalidating a large portion of the currency in circulation, they could cripple the black market and assert greater control over the economy. The problem was, the junta's execution was about as subtle as a sledgehammer in a china shop. They simply declared that certain denominations of the Burmese kyat were no longer legal tender, without offering any real opportunity for people to exchange their old notes. The result? Utter chaos, of course. People's savings were wiped out overnight, businesses were paralyzed, and public anger reached a boiling point. Protests erupted across the country as citizens, already struggling under the weight of authoritarian rule, found themselves pushed to the brink. Myanmar's demonetization debacle became a textbook example of how not to implement a complex economic policy. Fasten your seatbelts, comrades, because we're traveling back in time to 1991, to the waning days of the Soviet Union. The once mighty empire is teetering on the brink of collapse, plagued by shortages, corruption, and a general sense of economic malaise. In a desperate bid to regain control and combat the burgeoning black market, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev decided to roll the demonetization dice. His target, the 50 and 100 ruble notes, the highest denominations in circulation at the time. The idea was to flush out hoarders, speculators, and other shady characters who were profiting from the country's economic woes. But there was a slight problem. The Soviet Union was already a powder keg of instability, and demonetization proved to be the spark that ignited the flames of discontent. People were given a mere 3 days to exchange their old notes, and long lines snaked around banks as citizens already grappling with shortages of basic goods found themselves facing yet another indignity. Public anger boiled over, and protests erupted across the Soviet Union. The policy fueled public resentment, eroded trust in the government, and contributed to the sense of chaos and uncertainty that ultimately led to the Soviet Union's dissolution. Our final stop takes us to West Africa, specifically Ghana, where the year is 1982. The country is in the throes of an economic crisis, and the government is desperate for solutions. Their target? Tax evaders, those sneaky individuals who are somehow managing to shield their wealth from the taxman. The weapon of choice? You guessed it, demonetization. The government announced that the 50 CDI note, the highest denomination at the time, would be replaced with a new 50 cedi coin. The catch? Citizens had a limited time to exchange their old notes, and any amount exceeding a certain limit would be subject to, you guessed it, taxes. Now, on the surface, this might seem like a reasonable approach to tackling tax evasion, but in reality it was a logistical nightmare. The new coins were bulky and inconvenient, and the exchange process was riddled with corruption and inefficiency. The result? Public anger reached fever pitch. People who had been diligently saving their hard-earned money suddenly found themselves treated like criminals. Protests erupted across the country, and the government was forced to backpedal on some of its more draconian measures. Ghana's demonetization experiment failed to curb tax evasion in any meaningful way, and it left a bitter aftertaste of resentment and distrust towards the government. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of demonetization experiments from around the globe. As we've seen, it's a policy with a mixed track record capable of yielding both positive and disastrous outcomes. One thing is abundantly clear. Demonetization is not a magic bullet. It's a complex economic tool that should be wielded with extreme caution and only after careful consideration of its potential consequences. If there's one key takeaway from our journey, it's this. Successful demonetization requires meticulous planning, clear communication, and a robust financial infrastructure. Attempting to implement such a drastic policy without these crucial elements is like trying to perform open-heart surgery with a rusty spoon, messy, unpredictable, and likely to end badly. So the next time you hear a government talking about demonetization, remember the lessons we've learned from these 6 countries. It's a powerful tool, but its success depends on a multitude of factors. And as we've seen, the consequences of getting it wrong can be severe. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more insightful and hopefully slightly less chaotic explorations of the global economy. Good night.